The story begins in a place where a Shaolin temple is located. This figure is Master Mu San, a man who has lived his entire life on the path of Buddha, and he was visited by a guest who wanted to know about Wai Yonho. The child in front of him confirmed this because he was collecting materials to document his history. Master Mu San laughed because everyone knew that figure as Wai Yonho was an unmatched martial arts master. The old man went on to say that Wai Yonho was an honest man, so kind-hearted, that the Buddha must have sent him to this world. The child was very excited to hear this because he had suspected it, but he also wanted to know about the daily life of this great figure. However, the child was slightly confused when he saw Mu San's body trembling as if holding something back, and he even had difficulty describing Wai Yonho. Unexpectedly, Mu San became very furious, even continuing to denounce Wai Yonho's name because he could no longer hold himself back from saying good things about him. The child became even more confused and wondered why a master who followed the path of the Buddha would say such a thing. Then the child went to the Peng clan located in Hubei province, only to be rudely driven away. The person who drove him away was the Peng clan's supreme elder, Peng Dojuk, and he asserted that the name was not fit to be mentioned within his clan. He even warned the child never to set foot in his clan again if he did not want to be taught a lesson. Not only that, but Dojuk also threw sprinkled salt at him to ward off the bad luck he caused by glorifying Wai Yonho's name. Wai Yonho was a legendary figure who ended an era of chaos, and a true warrior with a chivalrous spirit, whose name became a topic of conversation all over the world. Some called him the greatest of all time, and others called him humanity's greatest chivalrous warrior. But the child did not understand why everyone refused to talk about him, even though he had been driven away repeatedly. As a historian, it was his duty to document everything, including hidden history. The information about Wai Yonho that he obtained was only about his greatness, but there was no further explanation about what he was like as a child, the source of his martial arts, or even how he lived his daily life. After running for quite some time, the child now stopped in a slum that looked unfit for habitation. There he met Mad Dog, the elder of the beggar sect, and Mad Dog kept laughing when he heard the story of the child in front of him, about how he was driven away from the Shaolin Temple and other clans. The child confirmed it, and everyone reacted badly when they heard the legendary name Wai Yonho. As the elder of the beggar sect, Mad Dog possessed the largest information network of all time, and he knew very well the reason for the treatment the child in front of him received, and even knew why Wai Yonho was hated. The child was stunned, and he began to wonder if he could now find the answer he had been looking for all this time. Feeling a bit bored, Mad Dog was going to tell the story of 100 years ago, specifically in the Wai clan located in Guangdong. That legendary figure was the absolute worst type of person among others. With eyes nearly closed, 12-year-old Wai Yonho said he wanted to become the strongest. This is the story of a boy who dreamed of becoming the greatest under heaven. He was born into a martial arts clan and raised with the skills to become a great warrior, and his clan even hoped he would become a star. Although he was only 12 years old, Wai Yonho knew a fact regarding the fastest way to reach the top. That path was relentless effort and agonizing training even if his body was covered in wounds or his palms had to blister from hard training. He also understood that no matter how talented someone was, there would be no results without effort. For a boy with such a dream, effort was the only way to move forward, but there was one small problem he faced. The problem was very simple, which was that Wai Yonho was late in starting his hard training today because he just kept lying in bed. Wai Yonho was a child who only wanted to stay in his bed and was too lazy to see the outside world. But he also couldn't help but think about his dream of becoming the strongest in the world. Suddenly, he twisted his body as if he was very eager to do something. However, in reality, Wai Yonho decided to sleep first and start his training tomorrow morning, even though he had only been in his room all day. A moment later, someone came, hearing loud snoring from Wai Yonho. Even though that figure tried to wake him up, Wai Yonho remained sound asleep in his pleasant slumber. Because he couldn't stand it anymore, that figure shouted at him to wake up immediately. Wai Yonho woke up and showed his lazy expression, asking why his sleep was disturbed. It turned out that this figure was Wai Zhonghan, the patriarch of the Wai clan, and he asked if his son knew what time it was now. With a lazy tone, Wai Yonho replied that it was the time when the sun was up, and his father then asked why he was still lying in bed, and Wai Yonho replied because the sun was about to go down, indicating the end of the afternoon. During that conversation, his father tried to restrain himself and asked again if Wai Yonho knew how long he had been locking himself in the room. Even when speaking, Wai Yonho was actually very lazy and preferred not to open his mouth. But what could he do? He had to answer his father's question, and he didn't know for sure, maybe 2 or 3 days. However, Wai Zhonghan could no longer tolerate it and even called him a useless child because he had been lying down for 4 days without doing anything. His father did not understand whether his son did not feel pain all over his body without doing anything. Even a bear had to turn its body to sweat before continuing its sleep. While laughing, Wai Yonho asked his father not to worry about him, because that was why he was waking up now. However, his father was truly at the breaking point dealing with his son's useless behavior, even though he had high hopes for him. Then Wai Yonho informed him that he had actually tried to train, but every time he opened his eyes the sun had already set. When the sun sets, it is time to sleep, and by doing so, he can wake up tomorrow for training. That ridiculous reason made his father furious, and if left alone, he would continue to sleep until adulthood. Wai Yonho had never seen his father this angry, and he even said he would correct his bad attitude today. Lazy Wai Yonho was beaten by his father until screams were heard inside their residence. A moment later, in the Wai clan office, the clan head looked very troubled, thinking about his useless son and his strange attitude. In the middle of this, Zhou Bang, the Wai clan's head administrator, asked if the clan head was thinking about the second young master again. Wai Zhonghan confirmed it because there was nothing else that could weigh on his mind, except his second son, and Zhou Bang felt that the young master would surely come to his senses when he grew up. However, Wai Zhonghan did not feel that way, and he believed this must all be his fault. In the past, the Wai clan head went on a martial arts dueling journey when Wai Yonho was 2 years old because he was also a figure who dreamed of reaching the peak. He left behind his pregnant wife and 2 sons named Wai Sanho and Wai Yonho. At that time, he thought his journey would only take 2 years at most, but he encountered various unexpected events. 8 years later, he was finally able to return to his clan. Although he earned the nickname Righteous Chivalrous Swordsman, and people talked about him across the country, the impact he received was quite significant. Although people praised him, the changes in his family were unavoidable. His wife, who used to be gentle, became fiercer than a tiger. Then his beloved son, whom he thought would not be a problem at all, turned out to be even more worrying. Wai Yonho grew up to be an unmatched lazy child. No one had ever equaled him. Although Wai Zhonghan was very angry, he also could not be too harsh on his son because all of this was also his fault in the past. Then Zhou Bang asked the clan head not to worry because there must still be a way to restore his son's spirit as a martial artist in the future. That statement made the clan head curious, and Zhou Bang tried to remind him of something that the clan head might have forgotten. That person would be returning soon. Wai Zhonghan's expression immediately changed because he really did not remember it. At least, Wai Zhonghan knew that there was someone Wai Yonho feared in this clan. That figure was now behind him, and Wai Yonho was curious why the air in this place suddenly became colder. He immediately turned around and saw the figure who dared to enter his room without even knocking. It turned out that the figure was Wai Sanho, also the eldest son of the Wai clan, and he was now looking at his younger brother with such cold eyes. Instantly, Wai Yonho put his feet together when his older brother asked how long he had been sleeping, but Wai Yonho tried to divert the question by wanting to know when his older brother returned. However, Wai Sanho was not fooled and wanted his younger brother to answer the question he had given. Wai Yonho scratched his head because he did not know what to answer, since if he was caught lying, he would surely be in trouble. But Wai Sanho's sharp gaze was truly terrifying to him. Having no choice, Wai Yonho answered that all this was not what his older brother thought, that he had exercised this morning and even trained so hard that it made him fall into a deep sleep due to exhaustion. Although Wai Sanho repeated his question, Wai Yonho still answered the same thing, showing his seriousness. Therefore, Wai Sanho asked him to split the candle in this room in half because he also did not want to judge his younger brother without a strong reason. He was curious how much progress his younger brother had made in these 3 years since his departure to the academy. Wai Yonho, who had no choice, immediately took his sword and stood facing the candle. His older brother did not have much time because he had not even met the clan head and came directly to his younger brother's room, so Wai Yonho should do it immediately. With a soft tone, Wai Yonho felt that this should not be done because they were in a room and using a technique in a place like this was quite dangerous. Instantly, Wai Sanho shouted at him because his younger brother did not need to worry about that since he would take responsibility for what happened. Wai Yonho truly felt very unlucky and wondered why his older brother had to be like this to him. Having no other choice, he swung his sword as if he were someone who was very confident in his abilities. With his half-closed eyes, he would show his great skill so that his older brother would leave immediately because he needed to go back to sleep. In a short time, Wai Yonho rushed forward with a very convincing sword style. Seen from any angle, he looked truly skilled, and splitting a candle should not be a big problem. He had now passed the candle after delivering his best strike. Wai Yonho hoped everything went smoothly. After all, he had performed the sword technique as taught by his older brother years ago. But in reality, the candle was not split, indicating his failure. With this, he was very panicked because his peaceful life would surely end soon. Although his older brother was very scary to him, Wai Sanho had a character worthy of a leader, and he was surprised that 3 years had passed, but his younger brother had not yet mastered the required sword technique. Wai Sanho immediately left while adding that his younger brother was indeed useless, even worse than 3 years ago. Moving to the evening, where the clan head and his immediate family members were enjoying dinner. Although this was just dinner, Wai Yonho had a premonition that he was going to be in trouble. Wai Zhonghan asked about Wai Sanho's academy life, and Wai Sanho replied that everything was fine without any problems. Even so, he did not deny that there were some difficulties, but they were all things he deserved as a student, and in order to improve, all he needed to do was overcome them. His father truly apologized because he must have experienced many difficulties when he was not around. However, Wai Sanho did not think that way, instead considering that it was his father who had difficulties, having to leave for so long before returning. But among all the problems he faced, there was something truly heavy and disturbing his mind. Both his mother and father were surprised to hear that, and they were very curious. It turned out that the problem Wai Sanho was referring to was about his own younger brother. Wai Yonho, who heard that, began to panic because something was definitely going to happen to him. Then Wai Sanho expressed his opinion that his younger brother should be enrolled in the martial arts academy. That statement felt like a disaster for Wai Yonho, and this was the worst possible outcome. Returning to the present time, where Mad Dog was going to tell the reason why sect leaders ground their teeth just hearing the name of the legendary figure Wai Yonho. In this story, a great history will begin, where the true slacker shows his fangs in the Murim world. At that time, no one could have ever imagined that the figure who was even too lazy to open his eyes was a great star who made all his enemies tremble with fear. Thanks to Wai Sanho's input, Wai Yonho had no choice but to follow that wish, and he left his clan riding the horse, but Wai Yonho was still very lazy, even having trouble keeping his balance because he wanted to just lie down. While shedding tears from sleepiness, he suggested that his older brother stop for a rest first before leaving, even though the horse's footsteps could be counted as they had just left the clan. Today was the worst day of his life, as Wai Yonho was forced to leave his clan to go to the martial arts academy. Even so, his younger sister, named Wai Surian, cried over his departure because she did not want her older brother to leave her. Only his father kept laughing, seeing off his departure with the hope that his son would return as a true man who could make his family proud. While waving his hand, Wai Yonho shouted, asking his younger sister not to cry because he would definitely return. Meanwhile, his mother asked his father to stop laughing because her mood was currently bad. After being in the forest, the situation was in a safe condition without the slightest problem. That was what Wai Sanho thought, and he was sure this step was very appropriate to make his younger brother repent from being a useless man. However, for Wai Yonho, this was terrible, and he kept lying down on his horse. He kept asking if they were close yet, but his older brother had not answered him since earlier. Then, his older brother, fed up with hearing that, said that this journey still had 10 days left, and that surprised Wai Yonho because it was truly torturous for him. His older brother felt they could arrive in at least 5 days if Wai Yonho could ride a horse properly, but he had already said he never rode a horse. His older brother did not blame him, and he was just answering the question that his younger brother repeatedly asked. With full laziness, Wai Yonho invited his older brother to rest, because this hill was very steep and he was also exhausted on the horse, as if his whole body wanted to explode from fatigue. Then Wai Yonho pointed to a dry tree where there were people resting and they could go to that place too. However, Wai Sanho sensed something was wrong even though he saw it from a distance. To make sure, he wanted to check it directly and asked his younger brother to stay behind him. Wai Yonho became more confused about why his older brother was acting like that, and this was very boring. It turned out that the people lying there were no longer alive, and flies were even starting to swarm them. Even so, Wai Sanho did not show any expression, as if he was used to death. Then Wai Yonho approached, accompanied by his body being too weak to even move. Seriously, Wai Sanho revealed that those people were dead. That certainly surprised his younger brother, because Wai Yonho was not used to situations like this, where he only spent his time in his room. Then Wai Sanho tried to examine them further, and he found something quite interesting. It was visible that on the corpses' bodies there was a special mark, indicating that they had been hit by a certain technique. Based on Wai Sanho's knowledge, this technique was formerly called the Crimson Flower Palm Technique, because there were flower petals on the target's body, but because of a rapist figure named Seo Juak, this technique was nicknamed the Cruel Flower Indulging Technique. Wai Yonho, upon hearing that, suggested that the person might be around this mountain, and they should just go back. Such vicious treatment made Wai Sanho furious, because Seo Juak must have been looking for women who climbed the mountain, then capturing them, and the marks of the technique indicated he was targeting a girl and killing her guards. The corpses, although already swarming with flies, had not been dead long, and there was a possibility that the woman was still alive and was either running away or hiding in the mountain. Therefore, he had to make sure because he could not let the girl be caught, and he asked his younger brother to rest while waiting for him. In a short time, Wai Sanho darted away so fast, leaving his little brother who had never seen the outside world. Wai Yonho shouted with annoyance, because his older brother was so heartless to leave him with these ugly corpses. Even though he tried to call his older brother back, he was completely ignored. Since there was no point in shouting anymore, he stopped because it would only make him exhausted. Because the situation was truly unexpected, he had to survive and he began to observe his surroundings. In this place there were 2 horses that must have belonged to the dead people, and their luggage was still there. With everything around him, Wai Yonho was quite sure that what his older brother said was not wrong, because if this was a robbery, the horses and the goods would certainly have been stolen. But how could he stay in this place, in an unfamiliar place with several corpses, plus there was no decent bed to sleep on? A few hours later, Wai Yonho had lost his patience because his older brother had not returned even though night had arrived. Now he showed his serious face and returned to thinking about all the possibilities that might have happened, where something might not have gone smoothly. In the middle of that, the sound of a wild animal was heard, startling him and his horse. Although Wai Yonho was very lazy to do this, he had to do something, because being in this place could make him food for a mountain leopard. When he wanted to ride his horse, suddenly a thunderclap occurred and startled him greatly. The rain began to fall, and now all that remained were their 2 horses because the thunder made the other horses run away in fear. With a smile, Wai Yonho did not expect bad luck to befall him, having to get caught in the rain like this, and the reason behind the smile was because he was imagining his comfortable bed.